Hello, I'm the Shadow Critic, and today I'm talking about Harry Potter. So as you almost definitely already know, Harry Potter is one of the biggest franchises on Earth. Everyone loves it. Everyone loves this thing. It's so huge, it's so enormous. It's everywhere. It's not as prominent as it once was, but it was once so big. And I'm kind of a Harry Potter expert, which is weird, because I'm not actually that into Harry Potter. But it's just that for some reason I'm kind of a Harry Potter expert. I don't know what it is. It may be because in Britain they just play the films a lot, or it may be because I just have a really good memory, I can just remember all of the films. Or it may be because when I was a kid I often got bored and one of the only things to do was to take trivia quizzes on BuzzFeed. Who remembers BuzzFeed? Yeah, that makes you feel old, doesn't it? Remember when BuzzFeed was the most popular thing on Earth? But yeah, I used to take a lot of personality and trivia quizzes on BuzzFeed because there was nothing else to do. And so I guess through a combination of all those things, I just became a Harry Potter expert. I know so much about it. Like, I know so much about the Harry Potter lore. I have such an in-depth knowledge of it, it's crazy. Especially when you consider I'm not even that into it. And it really doesn't make any sense I'm not into it, because I'm British. So you would think that because I'm British, I would just be really into Harry Potter. And Harry Potter also came into prominence when I was younger, so there's a nostalgia factor. So you would think through the combination of being British and nostalgia, I would just love Harry Potter, especially since I know everything about it, every single detail of the lore. But for some reason I just don't, I mean, I'm not saying it's awful, I'm not saying it's unwatchable, I'm not saying it's bad. I like Harry Potter, I like it just fine, but I'm not like, yeah, this is great, this is brilliant. And people are really obsessed with it. I think it's just, like, fine, it's good, it's solid. But people love Harry Potter. I'm just like, it's good. So I'll give some of my thoughts on it. And I may make this another episode at some point with an actual review, or I may do filler on it, or I may do some more content like this on it in the future. Because this is just going to be pretty quick. Because I'm kind of in a rush, so this is going to be pretty quick. So I may make some more content on this later. So one of the things I don't really like about Harry Potter is that the magical and non-magical worlds don't overlap well. They don't meld together very well. It just feels like someone shoved a magical world onto our world. So in Lord of the Rings, it took place in a different universe, so it was a completely different universe. So it made sense that they were living in a fantasy land because it's a completely different universe. And in Narnia, the humans travelled to Narnia through a different dimension. So in Narnia, the humans travelled to Narnia using the wardrobe, which led them into a different dimension. So it's like Narnia exists as a different dimension. And that's why it's magical, because it's a completely different dimension to our own. So I feel like there's a better distinction between the normal world and the magical world in Narnia. But in this one, it just doesn't really feel like there's a good distinction. It just feels like the magical world is sort of just shoved into the real world. And a good example of this is when they go to visit the Ministry of Magic, and they just take a phone booth and it sort of lowers them down. And then you can also get into the ministries by flushing yourself down a toilet. And it just feels really underwhelming. It's like, what's the entrance to this magical world of wonder and splendor? And it's like, oh, well, you get into a phone booth and it just lowers you down. Or you just go to a train station and walk through a wall. And it's like, well, that's the entrance? I mean, okay, you can say the entrance to Narnia was just a wardrobe. But, I don't know, honestly, the entire walking through a wall thing and the entire going down a phone booth just doesn't really feel that magical to me. It's just kind of underwhelming. And whenever you see the non-magical world, it just kind of takes you out of the movie. Like whenever I see the Dursleys' house, or at Fleur's wedding when Hermione apparates the group back to London, it just kind of takes me out of the experience. Because it's like, oh, okay, well, we're not in the movie anymore. Now we're in a completely different movie. Because the wizards have really low technology, and then you have London, which is full of technology, and I don't know, it just takes me out. Although I did actually like that scene where Hermione apparates them and a bus almost hits them. I thought that was cool. I'm not going to lie, I thought that was cool. I thought that was a pretty cool scene. But then they're just sitting around in like a cafe and stuff, and it's like, really? I mean, this is like magical wizards just sitting in a cafe? I don't know, maybe it's because I live in London. It just feels so unmagical and boring to me. Like, whenever I see London, I'm just like, oh god, I hate that place. Because that's where I live. And it just reminds me of how depressing and boring my life is. And so it just doesn't feel grand. It just doesn't feel fitting for a wizarding adventure. This is like a wizarding world full of magic. And then you just go to London and it's just, oh god. So when I watch a movie or a TV show, I want to escape from my dreary, boring life, because my life is so boring and so dreary, and I just want to escape from it for a while, which is why I play games and watch TV and watch movies like Mortal Kombat, Naruto, Dragon Ball. These things are supposed to distract you from your boring, dreary life. But when your heroes keep going to places like London, and you keep seeing how shit London is, you keep remembering how boring your own life is. So it just really makes the entire thing feel really boring and depressing and gloomy. I don't know, maybe it's not the same for people in America, because like New York is in a load of films, and a load of films are filmed in America, so maybe for people living in America it's not the same. But for me, whenever I see London and Harry Potter, it just takes me out of the fantasy instantly, and reminds me of how boring my own life is. It's like, oh no, I watched these movies to escape from the boredom and tedium of my own life, but now it's coming to haunt me in the movie! It just feels very lacking. And I just can't get over the idea that I could go on a bus in depressing London and look over and see Lord Voldemort sitting on the bus, and like, it's like really, the Dark Lord, the evil one, the one whose name must never be said. I look over and I see the Dark Lord himself on a bus. That's totally possible in the Harry Potter universe. It just feels really lame. The Wizarding World also seems really weak and poorly developed. It's just like a load of huts. Like, all of the wizards live in these crappy little cabins, and it's just like these really crappy little cabins and small insignificant villages. Like, most of them don't even live in villages. Like the Weasleys and the Lovegoods, they live like completely alone, out in the middle of nowhere. And then you have like Hogsmeade, which is like a tiny village, and all of it just feels really insignificant and small. Like, I just don't care if Lord Voldemort takes them over. Like, so what? Who cares? Oh no, Lord Voldemort took over the Wizarding World. Well, that's like a tiny, insignificant village in Hogsmeade. And then you have, like, the Weasley's house. And then you have, like, the Lovegoods house. And I guess you've got Malfoy Manor. But who cares? Who cares if he takes over all that stuff? I don't care. Like, I live in a big city, okay? A massive super city. I don't care if Lord Voldemort takes over some stupid huts. As far as I'm concerned, he can take it all, I don't care. And I get that you want to make the wizards low technology, but I think it made them a bit too primitive. Because at least in Lord of the Rings, the elves had great cities. So the elves and the dwarves, they had these great super cities. Like, they had these massive cities, and they were full of splendor and brilliance, and they could rival like human cities. But honestly, I really don't care if Lord Voldemort takes over Ron Weasley's hut. I mean, I just don't care. It's like, oh no, they're burning down the burrow, Harry. And it's like, okay, sorry about your house, Ron, but I don't really care. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm sure it's sad for Ron, but who cares? I don't know, maybe I'm missing something, but it just doesn't really seem very significant if Voldemort takes over the Wizarding World. Especially since we can just nuke his ass. I mean, like, when Sauron was threatening to take over the world, he was pretty much the most powerful person in the world, and there was no one who could really rival him. So I guess if he took over the world, he would take complete dominance over everything, over all life. But if Voldemort takes over the world, we're just gonna nuke him. Like, it doesn't even matter if we can't find Hogwarts. We'll just stick a tracker to Hermione, and then we'll wait for her to go to Hogwarts, and then we'll nuke them all. Another thing about Harry Potter is they spend a lot of time at school. Which makes sense because they're children, so it does make sense they would be spending a lot of time at school, but it feels kind of unambitious. I mean, you have an evil dark wizard running around trying to take over the world, and they're wasting time at arithmancy class. I mean, it seems like they could be doing more important things. I mean, maybe if, like, Harry learnt more at school, like, it would feel more necessary for him to be there, but I don't know, in the movies he never really seems to learn that much. Hermione is better at him at everything, and she seems like she was just born better, so, like, maybe they should just skip the school and just go and fight Voldemort. There was also a lot of teen love drama. In The Half-Blood Prince, while Hermione is lusting after Ron, Voldemort is about to take over the world, and it's like, Hermione, I know, like, you're, like, in love with Ron, but could we please focus on, like, the Dark Wizard who's about to take over the world? And also, I just don't care about Quidditch. Like, Quidditch is a huge part of Harry Potter, but I just don't really care about it. I don't understand really how it works. I know, like, a lot of people have said that it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Like, the snitch makes the entire game completely pointless because all you need to do is catch the snitch. But I just am not really interested in sports except for martial arts, so I just don't really find Quidditch to be that interesting, and yet it's focused on so much in these movies. Like, it's such a big part of the movies, and it's like, well, isn't there more important stuff to focus on than some stupid game? Like, you know, fighting Voldemort and stopping him from taking over the world. I mean, if you're going to waste Harry's time by sending him to school, could you at least teach him some magic, you know, so he can fight the Dark Lord? But instead you have him playing a game of Quidditch? How is that going to help him fight Voldemort? As for the movies, Philosopher's Stone was alright, but obviously it was very restrained, and it was the first film, so I don't feel like it really went that big. It just felt kind of small, but it was alright, it was fine, it was good. Chamber of Secrets, I actually liked this one. This is actually one of the ones that I liked the best, certainly of the early movies. I actually really liked this one, but I only really liked the ending when they go into the chamber, because that felt like an adventure. That felt like they were actually having an adventure. When they go into the chamber, fight the basilisk, it felt like a real fantasy adventure, so I really liked that. The beginning of the movie isn't that great. It's kind of okay, but it's not that great. But I really like the ending. Prisoner of Azkaban was boring as hell. I really hated that one. It just felt so boring, so dreary. Like, it was just so long. I just really didn't like that one at all. I don't really care about Sirius as a character. I didn't really care what happened to him. And the entire ending is just them saving him. It's like, I don't even know who this guy is. It's like Harry's dad's friend. Who cares? Who cares what happens to Harry's dad's friend? I don't. Like, is this seriously the ending of this movie? We gotta save Harry's dad's friend. And it's like, why? We don't even know who he is. And it's like, oh, and Buckbeak too. And it's like, why? I don't care about Buckbeak. I don't have time to save Hagrid's pet. But the entire movie is just dreariness, boringness, and then at the end they save Sirius Black and Buckbeak. And it's like, who cares? Who cares? Well, I mean, I guess Sirius Black and Buckbeak care, but I don't. The entire movie is just really boring. It's just Harry whining about how hard his life is. It's like, yeah, I get that his life is hard, but I don't care, and this movie is boring. Goblin of Fire is also pretty boring, I have to tell you. It's just really not that interesting. Like, it's like there's a tournament, and there's all this competition, and they put their names in the goblet, and Ron's like, oh, Harry, did you put your name in the goblet without telling me? How could you do that? You know I wanted to be in the competition. It's like, I don't care. The ending is pretty cool. They resurrect Voldemort, but at the same time, the entire build-up to it is just really boring. And they could have gone there so much quicker. Like, there's so many ways they could have done this quicker, but they did the entire competition. It was so boring. I know, I just didn't enjoy it. The Order of the Phoenix is the most boring of them all. That is so boring. I can't even believe it's so boring. It's unbelievably boring. I would go as far as to say that it's unwatchable. I can't watch it. I just can't. It's so boring. I can't even remember what happens. There's some crap about a prophecy, and then they go to, like, the ministry, and there's, like, all these fortunes, and then the Death Eaters arrive. It's just so boring. The build-up to it. I can't remember what happens in the build-up. I cannot remember at all. The only thing I remember is the very end of that movie. Oh, and the beginning with Dudley, but that's it. Like, I can't remember anything else about that movie. It's just so boring. The end fight between Voldemort and Dumbledore is pretty good, but everything else is just so boring. I just cannot watch it. Half-Blood Prince was okay, but there was still too much school crap, and I don't really remember anything that important. Oh yeah, Dumbledore dies. That's the important part of that book. Dumbledore dies, but I just don't really remember that much about it. It was okay. And Deathly Hallows was also good, obviously. Well, Deathly Hallows Part 1 was actually pretty boring because nothing happened, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad, it was good, but it just wasn't that good because, like, nothing really happens. They're just setting up for Deathly Hallows Part 2. But it was still good, and then Deathly Hallows Part 2 was obviously good, except for Ron being a cuck. I mean, come on, Ron, where are your priorities? See, that's a line from Harry Potter, priorities. But yeah, where are your priorities, Ron? I mean, like, Voldemort is about to take over the world, and you're running off like a little cuck because you think Hermione likes Harry or whatever it is. Yeah, that's another thing about these movies. Ron is such a cuck. He's a mega cuck. I mean, my goodness, what an annoying character. I hear he's not as bad in the books, but he is just so annoying in the movies. Anyway, yeah, that's pretty much it. I think Harry Potter is good, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I hate it, I'm not saying it's terrible, I'm not saying it's unwatchable. I just don't really get into it that much. It's just not my thing that much. I mean, there's some stuff that I really get into, I really love, I really like it, I can just rewatch it whenever. Harry Potter, I'm like, yeah, I like it, it's good, but it's just not that good, for me at least. Well, I hope you found that entertaining. Subscribe if you want to, don't if you don't. I'm the Shadow Critic.